It's 11:41 p.m. in Pittsburgh, and the air has that wet chill that sneaks into your sleeves and stalls your breath. The rain turned to a fine mist around sunset, and now it hangs over the Monongahela like a gray veil. The stoplights on Carson Street are still cycling, even though there's no one to watch them. A red, yellow, green metronome for a city that has forgotten the beat. My name is Caleb Foster. You're tuned to 92.3 FM. I'm in the small studio on the third floor of a brick building in Southside that used to be a dentist's office and still smells faintly of fluoride when the heater kicks on. The main grid went down 2 days ago. The backup power for this place is a diesel generator on the roof that rattles the ceiling tiles and makes the whole room hum like a throat clearing before a bad confession. I keep it running 4 hours a night because that's what the fuel allows, and because night is when the mind goes soft and needs a voice. If you can hear me, your radio is working better than most things today. If you're close enough, you may see the tower light through the mist. If the signal fades, it isn't your set. It's the old transmitter heat sinking into the wet air, or the generator struggling to hold a steady cycle. I'll ride the fader when I have to. I'll stay on as long as I can. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. 3 days ago at 9:17 a.m., the city blinked and people were gone. It didn't start with sirens. It didn't start with fire. It started with absence. Not a crash or a scream. A hole. A janitor in the courthouse turned away from his cart to wring out a mop, and when he turned back, the woman from records who had been talking about her cat was no longer there. A city bus rolled to a stop on Smithfield because the driver's hands were no longer on the wheel. A nurse reached for a syringe, and her patient's wrist was not under her fingers anymore. A teacher at Arsenal Middle said, "Open your books to page." And when she looked up, half the class was empty chairs with open books spread like wings. This is how it began. With quiet, with things left behind. Coffee cups steaming on counters, a jacket caught on a door hinge, a phone buzzing on the floor where someone's hand should have been. By noon, the highways were a patchwork of idling cars with doors open and blinkers ticking. By evening, the walkways downtown looked like a set after the extras went home. The first night was the loudest, because the city had to learn what absence does to a system built on timing and people. Without hands on the controls, everything that can burn tries to burn. The old homes with space heaters and the new condos with ovens still on. Alarms howled and then lost their voices. Dogs barked until they were too tired. Stray fireworks burst from somewhere near Lawrenceville and no one cheered. If you were awake for it, you know what I mean when I say the silence after was heavier than the noise. It sat on your chest. It made it hard to swallow. We don't know why it happened. I'm not going to lie to you or fill the gap with magic words. I've heard the theories. I've written them down because my mind keeps leaking, and I don't want to forget. A retired air traffic controller named Ron, who lives near West Mifflin, found me yesterday with a hand radio and a pack of D batteries. He talked without looking at me, like his words would blow apart if they had to hit eyes. He said the first reports on aviation bans were not collisions, but empty planes. Autopilots kept altitude, but there were no voices from the cockpits. Inbound flights circled and circled until they ran low and diverted north to airfields with skeleton crews. He said radar saw clean air where transponders said there should be heat. He thinks this was not a single pulse, but a rolling blackout of people, like a wave that moved through the country along the grid lines. A woman named Marta, who works at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center Imaging, told me their MRI queue went strange seconds before it happened. Every machine in the building threw the same error about missing contrast agents, even when none were in use. She tried to restart a console, and when she turned to ask for the manual, the tech who always wore bright socks was gone. She thinks the event had something to do with magnetic fields, or the way our devices draw maps of the inside of us. A friend from college who ended up at a defense contractor outside Cranberry left a note at the front door down the street, duct-taped to the glass. In it, he wrote that the secure line went dead, then the backup, and then he watched two men in his team room vanish mid-argument while pointing at a plot of power anomalies across the PJM network. He wrote 3 words at the bottom in a different pen, like he ran out of ink and had to dig around. It's not random. Maybe it wasn't. All I know is that the missing aren't just names on a sheet. They are the way the city feels less even when the buildings still stand. They are the echo in stairwells that used to be warm from bodies going up and down. They are the green light turning to red and back while the mist makes halos nobody walks through. On day 1, there were still people shouting from windows and on corners. Have you seen my wife? Has anyone heard from Sheridan? Is there power in Shadyside? On day 2, the voices were lower, fewer, and most of them were asking about water. The supermarkets were rated fast but sloppy, as if the hands that took the food could not focus on what mattered first. Chips and beer went first because habit is stubborn even when the world changes. The water aisle was a mess of cracked bottles and wet cardboard. If you have a tub, fill it and cover it with plastic and lay a towel on top to keep dust out. If you have a water heater, there's 40 or 50 gallons inside, and you can draw from the drain at the bottom if the intake line is shut. If you have a roof that catches rain, rig a clean container to a downspout and let tonight's mist do the slow work all night. If you have a neighbor, knock with your knuckles and then call their name before you open their door. People are jumpy, and they have reason. Hospitals are in the worst shape because they cannot run on hope and ritual. They need steady current and full hands. UPMC Mercy had generators that kicked in, but no one left to tend the fuel feed on the 3rd floor. I walked past there this afternoon with a scarf over my face because the air smelled like metal and rubber. The lights were buzzing and dim, and then they flicked and went out. In a covered entrance, the wind had blown a circle of paper masks into a nest. There were trays on a cart with syringes still in their plastic, and one with the plastic off. I stood there for a long time, and then I put the cap back on the needle because it seemed like the kind of small act that keeps a line between us and whatever this is. Allegheny General had better fuel, but their call center was lit up with lines that nobody could answer. The screens changed colors with each incoming call while the room stayed empty. If you have skill with a generator, a fuel filter, a transfer switch, a diesel engine, you are more important than you were last week. If you have a blood pressure cuff and you know how to use it, knock on doors and listen for coughing. If you are strong and kind and have time, carry water upstairs to the older folks who can't come down. That is what keeps a street from going dark inside before the sun sets. Government channels have been worse than silent. They've been confused. The emergency alert system fired once here at 9:28 a.m. on day 1 with a message that sounded like a draft. Shelter in place. Await further instruction. Do not use cellular. Then the voice stopped mid-sentence, as if someone pulled the wire. Since then I've been scanning. The NOAA weather band is clean and steady, as if the robots that read the weather will go on until the masts fall. The county repeaters have sporadic bursts that sound like men reading off lists without breath. I caught part of a state police broadcast out of Greensburg with coordinates and the word triage, and then nothing. Someone is out there, but the net is full of holes. If you're on a hand radio, the range in the city is only a couple of miles without repeaters. Angle your antenna to the window and climb one floor if you can do it safely. Keep your transmissions short. Say your street and the cross street and the need. Say the time. Then get off the air. We have to learn to talk in little stitches and not long threads. I've heard the stories that will not leave me. A mail carrier named Denise, who lives up on Mount Washington, wrote in marker on a sheet and hung it from her balcony so I could read it with binoculars from the studio window. Half the block missing. Staying put. Water good. Dog here. If you have insulin, leave it at the mailbox with a note. A man on the north side plastered flyers that say, "I woke up and my wife's side of the bed was smooth, like nobody had slept there in months." He has been walking with a white rose in his back pocket, placing one petal on every doorstep that does not answer. On the 62nd Street Bridge, I saw a stroller turned on its side with one wheel spinning slow in the breeze. There was a little shoe under the guardrail. I stood there and tried to pretend I didn't know what that meant. I can't give you a way to carry that. I can only carry part of it out loud, so you don't have to carry it alone. There are patterns in the absence. Lists of the missing that survive in handwriting taped to shop doors show clusters by job, by place, by time. In some buildings, whole departments are gone while others stand. In one newsroom across the river, all the editors vanished and every intern stayed. In a union hall, the steward stayed and the apprentices vanished. On the hill, a whole block of elders is still there, but the young men are gone. Down by the strip, two fishmongers I've known for years were still scaling perch this morning, stubborn as brick, while every customer they expected did not come. If this was some blind sweep, it missed the mark in ways that feel pointed. A local ham operator who signs his call with the letters he scratched into his kitchen table told me he thinks the event ran on a clock we can't see, harvesting along schedules tied to unknown markers. He drew me a map with strings and pins like something from a crime show. I don't know if he's right, but standing here tonight, feeling the generator in the floor and the emptiness in the streets under it, I know the idea feels closer to the truth than the word random. If you're still adjusting your air, if your hands are shaking, if your chest hurts like you ran, that's your body trying to make sense of a problem it was never built to solve. Sit on the floor with your back against something solid. Count your breaths. Touch 5 real things and say their names. Table, door, cup, radio, sleeve. Drink some water, even if you don't feel thirsty. Eat something with salt, so you remember you have a mouth. This is not advice from a book. This is what I did an hour ago, when the thought came that I was the only voice left in the city, and it felt like leaning over a rail, with no river under it. I am not the only voice. I've heard others on weak carriers at night, voices from Bloomfield and Homestead, and as far as Wheeling when the air is kind. We're a set of small lights on a foggy hill. That's enough to keep the hill from vanishing. I said I would share what people with training think is going on, not because it will fix anything, but because naming a shape allows you to walk around it without falling in. A physicist who gave me only her first name, Claire, came by late this afternoon with a tote bag full of printouts like a talisman against our age. She taught at Carnegie Mellon and said words I promised not to repeat because she saw my face when she tried them out loud. The gist was this: there are ways the world can sort itself when pushed hard. Grid failures don't always start where you expect. Sometimes they start where the load is light and the wire is thin. She thinks the thing that took our people worked like that. Not a beam, not a sickness, a sorting. She pointed to the list on the wall I've been keeping with a marker and my bad handwriting. She traced circles around the clusters of office workers, transit employees, city desk editors, call center staff, and then she tapped the blank rectangle where I've written, "Under the table jobs we can't count." She said, "Systems reach for the easy nodes first." Then she did something I did not expect. She cried, not loud, not messy, just steady tears like a leak from a cracked gauge. She said, "My husband cleans the gutters on the block every fall because the city takes too long, and if he's still here, it means whatever did. This did not find him useful enough to take, and that makes me love him more and hate the world more, and I don't know where to put that." I told her to put it on the air because the air is big. I've been sleeping on the floor between the racks when the generator allows. I dream in buzz and hiss. I wake to the tick of cooling metal and the slow drip from a hole in the ceiling I have not found yet. In the desk drawer, there's a Polaroid of the old morning crew at a holiday party in ugly sweaters before the station changed hands and the new owner cut everything that wasn't cheap talk. I don't know most of their names. I put the picture on the console before I begin, because faces have weight. Today, I added a page from a school notebook I found on the sidewalk in front of the station. In a child's writing, "If you find this, I made a list of everyone on our bus who disappeared. Tell their moms I taped it next to the Polaroid. I speak to both while the red light is on. Now the practical part, because we have to keep our heads close to the ground. If you're in an apartment building, find the fire stairs, not the elevator. Propped doors are traps. Close them gently behind you to keep heat and smoke from running floors if something goes wrong later. If you need to cook, use a camp stove by a window with the window cracked. Don't burn charcoal inside. That's a quiet killer. If you have neighbors who know how to wire a transfer switch, ask them to teach 2 more people. If you find a pharmacy that hasn't been stripped, leave a note on the door with what you took and why, and take a box of basic antibiotics for someone else. If you have keys to a restaurant walk-in, write the location on a sheet and post it at the nearest 4-way stop. Make a schedule and divvy it up before the power loss turns good meat into sickness. If you are alone, write your name and an address on the inside of your shoe with a marker. I hate saying that. Do it anyway. I can confirm that there were small teams in marked vehicles moving along the Parkway East around noon today. They did not stop. They were headed east, and they did not look side to side. The city office at Ross Street is locked with steel security shades, and there are forms scattered under the crack like leaves. The National Weather Service site near Moon Township is still broadcasting, which means there's power on the hill. The big AM stations are gone to static at night. During the day, one out of Wheeling makes it through with church music and a voice that says, "Stay." If you hear a broadcast asking you to come to a single point for screening, be careful. Ask for a code phrase before you go anywhere. If the voice can't give you one, stay home. We don't have a shared code yet because we do not have a shared table. For now, here's mine. If I ever ask you to move to a new location for supplies or instructions, I will say the word pierogi in the first sentence because this is Pittsburgh, and even the end of the world can't take that from us. People ask about hope. Hope is not a banner. It's a chore. Today, hope looked like a line of neighbors on Sydney Street passing buckets from a busted gutter down to a tub, laughing when the tub tipped and they had to start over, laughing because laughter keeps your hands steady. Hope looked like a kid on a scooter towing a wagon with batteries in it while his aunt yelled, "Slow!" and he yelled, "No!" and the sound turned the street back into a street. Hope looked like an old man on the 10th floor holding a radio out the window and writing down the names of any station he could catch, like fireflies in July. Hope looked like a woman who took the time to tape a sign to a stop sign that said, "Knock here if you need help," and someone did, and she answered. This is us now. Small work, clean water, shared soup, honest lists. My name is Caleb Foster. This is 92.3 FM. I will be here again when the generator allows. If you can, set your watch to 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. and try this frequency. If you have a hand radio, scan around 462 and 467 megahertz for GMRS chatter. Some families have found each other there. If you have nothing but your breath, breathe slow. If you have nothing but your hands, make a sign and put it at the corner that says you're still here. If you have a story about the missing or the not missing, write it down and tape it someplace dry. Paper is our cloud now. I'm going to keep the carrier up for 10 more minutes while I switch fuel drums. The lights may flicker and the sound may thin. If you lose me, wait. I will come back. And if I don't, someone else will, because that's how this works now. We hand the city to each other in small pieces and try not to drop it. If you're awake, you are on duty. If you're tired, you have permission to sleep. If you're scared, so am I. If you're still here, that's enough for tonight. It's after 2 in the morning now, and the rain has stopped. The mist hasn't. It's thick enough that the city bridge lights glow like weak candles in jars, with nothing between them but shadow. The generator coughed twice at 1:10 a.m., and my hand froze over the fader, waiting for the silence. It came back, but I don't trust it. None of us should trust anything mechanical for long. We built our lives on systems that only work when they're invisible. Now they're visible, and you can see how brittle they were. Every hum, every flicker, every sudden silence feels like a warning. Earlier tonight, I walked down Carson Street and counted 9 cars still idling, empty, their gas tanks chewing themselves out of spite. One had a baby seat in the back with a blanket still strapped in. I pulled the blanket out and folded it into my pack because leaving it there felt like a betrayal. On the sidewalks, there are little patches of personal history. A shoe whose laces are still tied, a phone in a case shaped like a cartoon cat, a grocery bag with bread gone soft inside. When I look at these things, I feel like the world is a photograph where half the subjects were cut out with scissors. The outlines are still here, but the people are not. And the longer I stare, the more it feels like I might be next. There's no pattern that brings comfort. In the Southside Flats, every 4th house on one block is empty, while the rest of the families huddle inside with curtains pulled. In Oakland, one dorm at the university was gutted in minutes, while the building across the street is untouched. On the north side, people swear that the disappearances swept through like a gust. 2 whole apartment floors gone in under 30 seconds, while the floors above and below stayed full. The word random doesn't mean anything anymore. I keep hearing it on broken repeaters, like someone has given up on explanation and is just using it to fill silence. But I've walked these streets, and there's nothing random about the way my chest tightens when I step into certain alleys, the way my skin prickles near certain corners where too many shoes and coats lie piled. Something took them, and something left us, and I don't think that division was blind. Yesterday, a man named Gerald from Polish Hill came up to the station with a spiral notebook full of names. He was shaking when he handed it to me, but his handwriting was steady. He had written every person from his block who vanished, 41 names, all of them over the age of 35. He showed me his own birth certificate to prove he was 43 and still here, and his hands shook harder, as if his own survival made less sense than their absence. Then he asked me if I believed it was God. I didn't answer, not because I didn't want to, but because my throat wouldn't let me. Here's what I can tell you with certainty. Power stations outside the city are failing faster than the local grid. Duquesne Light reported spikes on the transmission lines at the moment of the disappearances. After that, half the substations locked themselves out, and the crews that were left couldn't reboot them. I heard a shortwave out of Harrisburg this evening that said it wasn't just here, that whole counties across Pennsylvania are reporting the same vanishings, the same silence, the same sudden ghosts of systems without workers. The voice on that frequency was a woman who called herself Relay 1. She said, Philadelphia hasn't answered in 24 hours. She said the Susquehanna nuclear plant went into automatic shutdown because the night shift never showed. If you're listening now, don't wait for help from above. Make your own net below. Share batteries. Trade candles for bottled water. Walk your street before you sleep and know who is still breathing behind which doors. If you're younger, knock for the older. If you're older, write down what you know. How to change a fuse. How to treat a fever. How to make something grow in dirt that isn't good. The missing may be gone, but the living still carry skills. Put them in the air, on paper, in memory. We cannot afford silence. I don't know if I'll be on the air tomorrow night. I'll try. The generator fuel is low, and the tower light flickers like it wants to give up. But I'll try. If I can't, and someone else finds this frequency, take it. Say your name. Say your street. Say one thing you did today to survive. Let the city know it's still occupied. If the disappearances come again, maybe words will anchor us where bodies can't. This is Caleb Foster, 92.3 FM, still on the air in Pittsburgh. If you're hearing me, you're still here. And right now, that's enough. It's nearly dawn now, and the sky over the rivers is turning the color of old ash. I've been watching it from the studio window, waiting for the first orange that used to mean another day was starting. But there's no rhythm anymore. Time feels like a cracked clock. The birds should be calling by now, but the air is empty. No morning rush, no footsteps on wet pavement, no clatter of coffee shops pulling up their metal gates. Just the low hum of this generator and the hiss of the transmitter. Sometimes I forget what silence used to sound like before it had weight. Now it presses in like fog, and the sound of my own voice feels like breaking glass in an empty house. I've walked past too many places that should have been anchors, but are just shells now. The strip mall in Homestead has doors open wide to the wind, shelves bare except for single boxes pushed into corners. The bakery where I used to buy bread on Saturdays, there's still flour on the counter, and the radio in the back room is tuned to static. I stood in there for 10 minutes, listening to the hiss, waiting for a voice that never came. I don't know why I stayed so long. Maybe because part of me thought the missing might come back if I just waited in their place long enough. But nothing moved. Just me, flour, and dust. People are beginning to notice something I haven't been able to shake either. The disappearances didn't stop on day one. They're slower now, but they're still happening. A woman named Sharon, who lives near Brookline, swore her husband was still beside her when she went to bed last night, but when she woke, the sheets were cold. His boots were by the door, his coat on the chair, but no sign of him. She left me a note under the station door that said only, "It's still happening. I'm not safe here." That's the part that twists my gut. If the wave keeps rolling, it means no place is steady. None of us can say, "We made it," Not yet. There are whispers on the shortwave bands. Some say it's an experiment, some kind of defense test gone wrong. Others say it's celestial, that something above us decided to thin us out like a gardener pulling weeds. I heard one man, his voice tight with fear, talk about patterns in prime numbers, that the vanishings are tied to sequences hidden in our power grids and data lines. I don't know how much of that is real. What I do know is that in Washington, D.C., the lights went out last night. A ham operator from Maryland broke in on the 40-meter band and said he saw the Capitol dome against the sky, dark as stone. No power, no noise. If the Capitol itself is silent, then the people who used to run things are either gone or unable to move. And that means we're on our own. I keep thinking about my sister, Leah. She was in Cleveland when this started. We haven't spoken in months, just the kind of distance that grows between people without meaning to. I tried her number on the first day, but the call rang and then died in my ear. I don't know if she's still out there. Maybe she's one of the ones still walking through mist with her head down. Maybe she's gone, her shoes left on a sidewalk somewhere I'll never see. That's what eats at me, not knowing. The missing are worse than the dead because the dead give you an end. The missing just hang over you like a door left open. If you're listening, here's what matters. Stay where you can be seen in daylight. Don't travel long stretches alone. Keep records, names, dates, streets. Paper won't vanish like signals do. If someone disappears from your building, write it down. If you hear of a block that stayed whole, write it down. Patterns matter. Even if we can't see them yet, someone will. And when you write, leave copies where others can find them. Tape them to poles, slide them under doors, tack them to church boards. We have to make our own network now, not out of wires, but out of words. I'll stay on this frequency as long as the fuel allows. 92.3 FM, Pittsburgh. My name is Caleb Foster, and if you're hearing me, you're proof that not everything has vanished. Maybe that's all the hope we need for this morning. The sun is trying to rise, and as long as it does, we try too. The sun is up now, or at least I think it is. The sky has that pale gray wash that usually comes after a storm, but today, it just looks drained, like the color's been wrung out of it. No warmth on the glass, no shadows on the street. I stepped outside for a few minutes to breathe something that wasn't dust and diesel, and I swear the city has grown quieter in the light. It used to be that daylight carried noise even when people were gone. The hum of transformers, the rustle of traffic, the click of crosswalks. Now, it's as if the daylight itself has thinned, stretched out so far that it can't carry sound anymore. My ears keep searching for something to fill the space, and all I hear is wind in places it never used to get through. This morning, I made it as far as the Smithfield Bridge. I wanted to see if the river could tell me anything the streets wouldn't. From the middle span, the water looked heavy, sluggish, like oil more than water. And lining the edge on the north bank were rows of shoes, not scattered, not tossed, but lined up. Men's boots, women's flats, sneakers small enough for kids, all pointed toward the river. No bodies, no footprints in the mud, just shoes waiting for something that already passed. I counted 72 before I forced myself to stop. I don't know who put them there or why, but when I turned to head back, I noticed my hands were trembling, and I had to grip the railing to make them stop. A man with a hand radio found me on the bridge. He said his name was Daniel, from Greenfield. He kept the radio pressed to his chest like it might slip out of his ribs if he didn't hold it there. He said he's been scanning all night and caught fragments of voices out of Ohio, maybe Columbus, maybe Dayton. They weren't military, just scattered people trying to hold frequencies. He swore one woman's voice said, It's moving east." He didn't know what it meant, neither do I, but the way his lips kept forming the words after he spoke them told me he believed it with everything he had. Before he walked away, he asked me if I thought the disappearances were done. I told him the truth. No. Not when I still hear about neighbors vanishing overnight. Not when there are new gaps in the lists taped to shop windows. Not when I can look at 72 pairs of shoes on the riverbank and know someone lined them up yesterday, not 3 days ago. What scares me most isn't the vanishing. It's what it leaves behind. Without people, the city is turning inward. Traffic lights cycle to nothing. Elevators stall between floors and stay there, full of silence. Refrigerators hum until they burn themselves out. Fire alarms chirp with dead batteries in apartments no one lives in anymore. These little machines were built to serve us, but with us gone, they don't know how to stop. They just keep going until something breaks. And when enough of them break, the city will become a graveyard of systems. Power grids collapsing under their own emptiness. Gas lines leaking into streets with no one to smell it. Water pipes bursting in silence until whole basements drown. We don't need another wave of vanishings to wipe us out. The leftovers are dangerous enough. If you're listening, I want you to do something today. Walk your block. Turn off what doesn't need to run. If you hear a smoke alarm beeping, take the battery out and save it. If you see water dripping under a door, shut the main line if you can. If you find a car still idling, cut the engine before it drinks itself dry. These are small things, but they keep the city from eating itself while we're still here. Survival isn't just food and water. It's keeping the skeleton of the world from falling on top of us. I don't know how many of you are left in Pittsburgh. I don't know how many of you are left anywhere, but if you can hear me, write down the date. It's the 4th day since the disappearances began, and the city still stands. We still stand. I'll be here tonight when the mist thickens again, on this same frequency, 92.3 FM. My name is Caleb Foster, and I'm not going anywhere yet. If you're out there, let that mean something. It means the world hasn't emptied all the way. Not yet. It's late afternoon, and the light has a thin edge to it, like someone cut a sheet of paper and held it up to the sky. I walked through the strip district looking for supplies, and found the place quieter than I expected, as if the city had inhaled and forgotten to breathe out. A woman had taped a list to the deli door with a marker. Standing, bakery, fish, 2 houses on 16th, call sign, Blue Lantern. No phone number, just a sign like a flag. I left a tin of beans beneath it, and another note that said simply, Caleb, 92.3. I saw how small acts stack into meaning. Somebody took the beans later. Someone else left a note that said, thank you. Blue Lantern here. We boil water on the roof. That exchange, tin for note, felt like currency now. Like a small market where kindness is the coin. There's a rumor going around that the military is setting up checkpoints on the river bridges and that they're asking for lists of people in your building before they let anyone cross. I can't confirm that from official channels because official channels are not reliable. What I can say is this. I watched a Humvee move slow past the station earlier, with 3 figures inside. Faces masked, but not banded like medics. They didn't stop. They kept going toward the south end of town, where the smoke was from a building that had caught fire days ago and never really died. People have seen convoys sometimes, and other times, nothing. It's inconsistent. The rule now is if you see armed people in uniform, don't assume they're here to help. Ask for identification. Ask what authority they represent. If they can't give you an answer that makes sense, don't step outside. Keep the door closed. Lock it if you can. We built a world where a badge should mean safety. That might not be true now. I found a library open by accident today. The front door was propped, and 2 volunteers had turned the reading room into a map table. They were tracing neighborhoods with pencils and taping pages to the wall. Supply runs, elderly check-ins, fuel stock. They'd organized shifts, meals, and a quiet place for people to write letters to those who might come back. There's a softness in people that survives, even when everything else cracks. A girl named Amaya set up a small corner with crayons and paper and told the kids who came by to draw whatever they wanted. Houses, trains, monsters with shoes, suns with 10 rays. The sun drawings are always the ones I look at first because they show how people still imagine morning. The library is now a hub for knowledge and memory. If you can, find a public place willing to hold maps. Tape your block to a page, mark a well, mark a shop with a working fridge, mark names. When others pass, they'll add what they know. This is how we make a city that remembers. There are more stories than I have time to tell, and each one makes me both sick and stubborn. A woman in Bloomfield found a backpack full of toys on her stoop with a note that said, "If you need, take." The toys had been left by someone who didn't want them anymore, or by someone who had to leave. Either way, the toys went to a shelter that afternoon, and the kids were happier for a week. An electrician named Marco, who used to work on the tunnels, taught 2 teenagers how to splice wires and rig a temporary light for a stairwell. They held the light up and watched faces come back into shape. The simple act of being able to see one another changed how those people moved through the world. You'd be surprised at what a little light does. It's not about comfort. It's about recognition. Seeing another person as a person and not a shadow. There are reports of people leaving their homes because the fear of staying felt worse than the fear of leaving. That choice is heavy. One man I met, he called himself Tom, but I think that was a name he used, so the list on his phone would look like someone. Told me he walked to the river and sat on a bench for hours until a woman joined him with a thermos of coffee. They traded stories until the coffee ran out, and then they traded places by the bench. They decided to share a room in a building that had a working boiler. That's how communities are forming. Slow, careful trades of warmth and trust. Not always perfect, not always safe. But human beings bind together when the ground is shaking because we need each other's hands to stand. I can feel myself getting tired in a new way. Not the tired of a long day, but the tired that sits behind your ribs and presses when you think about everything that could go wrong. The first night I stayed awake because I feared the dark. Now I stay awake because I fear forgetting. Memory is our last defense. If we don't write who was here and what we did, the story will fold and crease until the truth can't be read. Tonight, I will set a notebook by the radio and write down every name someone leaves with a mark. If you have a marker, leave it where someone can use it. If not, use a stick and write names in the soil. It counts the same. There's one more practical thing I need to tell you, because it's the kind of small knowledge that can keep someone alive for another day. If you have a car and it's been sitting with its battery for days, don't try to start it at night when you're tired. Batteries die faster in cold. Check the oil with the dipstick, and if you can access the fuse box, remove the fuse for any non-essential lights to save juice. If you are hoarding canned goods, rotate them. Eat the oldest first. If you're guarding meds for someone in your building, Write their name on the package and the dosage times. If you don't know how to do any of this, find someone who does and ask. We have to make the street a school again, quick and humble. The list of what we've lost grows like a ledger. Trains not moving, streetlights stuttering, people not coming home. The list of what we still have is smaller, but steadier. Radios that carry voices, kitchens with a working flame, someone in your building who remembers how to start a generator. These small things make a life possible. Hold on to them. Trade them when you are able. Teach someone else before you sleep. This city is teaching me patience in a way I never wanted. I befriend my patience out of necessity. It answers back in ways I can use. I'm going to sign off for a short while to walk the neighborhood and drop off some supplies. I'll come back before dusk. Keep your radios tuned. If you can, set a note at your door with names and a time so others know who you are and when you were last seen. If you can't do that, put a cloth in the window. Anything that tells a passerby you're still breathing. We do not know how long this will be. We only know today. Live it as well as you can. I am Caleb Foster on 92.3 FM. If you're out there, make a mark and leave a light. I'll be back. The day is sinking into another gray evening, and the mist that had lifted for a few hours has crawled back over the bridges. From the window here on Carson Street, I can see the glow of the city's tallest buildings swallowed halfway up, their tops hidden like someone erased the skyline with an old rag. It makes the whole place feel shorter, closer, like the sky is pressing down. The streets below are wet with a shine that looks like oil. I've been walking more slowly lately, because the silence plays tricks, and every corner feels like it's holding its breath. On the way back this afternoon, I cut through a side street near 18th and saw something that has been gnawing at me. 3 chairs were set around a small table outside a cafe, and the table still had half-empty cups on it, dark liquid clinging to the bottoms. But the chairs weren't just abandoned. They were pushed back, as if the people sitting in them had stood up quickly. No coats left behind, no bags, no trash, just cups and chairs. I stood there staring, and for a moment I could almost hear the voices, laughter, the scrape of mugs on ceramic plates. The air still carried a faint smell of coffee, sour with time. That kind of scene tells me the disappearances don't just happen in beds or in quiet. They happen mid-sentence, mid-sip, in places meant to hold us together. That unsettles me more than anything. I keep hearing that some areas are emptier than others, as if the wave of vanishings thickened in certain pockets. In Lawrenceville, a whole block of houses is silent. Windows open, meals half-cooked on stoves, laundry still damp on lines. People from Bloomfield who walked through said it felt like stepping into a photograph where everyone had been erased. But in Beachview, most of the houses still have families inside, shaken but intact. Why one street and not the next? Nobody has an answer. The word random keeps coming up, but I've stopped trusting it. When enough people repeat it, it sounds like a lie we tell ourselves, so we can stop asking questions. I managed to catch a faint signal earlier on the shortwave band. A man's voice clipped, speaking in bursts. It was hard to catch, but I wrote down what I heard. Triage Center, East Perimeter, Containment ineffective. Repeat ineffective. Then static. Then nothing. If there really was a triage center east of here, it may not be standing anymore. Or maybe they've stopped trying. If you hear a broadcast telling you where to gather, listen carefully. Ask yourself who is speaking and why. The air is full of signals, but not all of them are for us. There was one more thing today. A boy, maybe 10 or 11, showed up outside the station holding a radio bigger than his chest. He wouldn't come inside, just stood there in the drizzle until I stepped out. He asked if I was the voice he'd been hearing. I told him yes, and he nodded once, tight, like it was the answer to a question he'd been holding. Then he handed me a sheet of paper with a list of names in a child's handwriting. At the bottom, it said, "Still here." He didn't say which house. He didn't say who he was. He just left the paper in my hands and walked back into the mist. I've read that list 5 times since. It steadies me, the thought that somewhere out there, a handful of people wrote their names down and chose to mark their survival. If you're listening to me now, do the same. Write your name, your street, the date. Tape it to a door. Slide it under a stairwell. Leave it where someone can see it tomorrow. If the vanishings keep coming, then at least we'll know who we were, where we stood, what mattered enough to put in ink. That may be all we can do. This is Caleb Foster on 92.3 FM. The mist is thickening, the fuel is running low, and the night is stretching out in front of us. But if you're hearing me, you're proof the city isn't empty yet. Hold on. Keep marking the days. Keep leaving signs. We are still here, and that means something. Night has fully settled now, and the city feels hollow in a way I can't quite describe. The mist hasn't lifted. If anything, it's thicker, curling against the glass like it wants in. The bridges glow faintly with what's left of the streetlights, but their reflections in the rivers are broken, scattered across the water in pieces that don't line up. I sat for a while with the radio dial spinning through static, hoping for another voice. But all I caught were bursts, half syllables, faint clicks, the kind of noise that makes you wonder if it was human at all or just the air shifting. The silence after each burst stretches out too long, and I have to remind myself I'm not the last one alive, even when it feels like it. I walked to the library again before dark. The map wall has grown. More pages taped together, more notes in uneven handwriting, arrows marking streets where people were last seen. But here's the part that caught my chest. Whole sections have been crossed out with thick black marker. Not because the buildings burned, not because people moved, because everyone in those sections is gone now. Someone is keeping track, someone is erasing, and the space between the names left and the black ink grows wider by the day. I added the note from the boy who came by yesterday, the one with the list of names and "still here" at the bottom. I taped it right in the center. Maybe it will hold someone steady the way it held me. There's a pattern people have started whispering about. It's not official, not proven, but it lingers. The vanishings seem to strike most often when people gather. A street corner conversation, a family dinner, 3 workers on break at the same time. Gone. But single individuals, alone in their rooms or walking empty streets, are left behind. I don't know if it's true, but I can't ignore what I've seen. The cafe table with 3 chairs empty. The library crowd smaller every day. The bridge lined with shoes as if groups of people walked to the edge together and disappeared all at once. If the pattern is real, then being alone may be the only reason I'm still here. That thought doesn't comfort me. It chills me to the bone. On the emergency band tonight, I caught fragments of a voice from out west. Maybe Wheeling, maybe further. The words that cut through were "containment abandoned," and spread unchecked. Then silence. That's all it takes now. 2 broken phrases and a pause, and suddenly the air is heavier. If containment has failed anywhere else, then this isn't just Pittsburgh. This isn't just Pennsylvania. This may be everywhere. I tried to hold the dial steady, but the voice never came back. I think a lot about the people who were taken mid-motion, mid-word, mid-breath. If this thing is still rolling, still eating pieces of us, then it means none of us are secure. It means tonight might be my last time speaking into this microphone. If it is, I want someone to know that I tried to hold the line, not against the vanishings, because I can't stop them, but against silence. If you can hear me, that means the city hasn't fallen all the way. That means there are still ears, still hearts, still hands writing names on paper. Before I shut down the generator to save fuel, I want to leave you with something practical. Keep your radio batteries warm. Cold drains them faster. If you have candles, don't burn them all at once. Shield one behind a jar, let it last longer. Boil water even if it looks clean. And when you write your name down for the world to see, write it big. Write it like you mean it. Because that mark may be the only proof tomorrow that you were here tonight. This is Caleb Foster, 92.3 FM, Pittsburgh. The night has swallowed the streets, but we're not gone yet. Hold steady. Write it down. Keep breathing. I'll try to be here when the sun rises, if the sun remembers to rise. The sun rose, but it barely looked like morning. Just a pale disk behind the mist, weak as a lantern running out of oil. I stood on the roof for a while after shutting off the generator, watching the light smear across the river, and I realized something. There are fewer sounds each day. Yesterday I heard distant hammering from a block where people were patching windows. Today, nothing. Not even the gulls that used to circle the rivers for scraps. It's as if the city itself is holding its breath, waiting to see if it too will disappear. I walked north this morning, past Liberty Avenue, through streets where the only movement was curtains shifting in broken windows. At a corner near Penn, I saw a bus still parked at its stop, door open, lights off. Inside were coats and bags on the seats, but no people, not even footprints on the damp floor. Just objects lined up like the owners might walk back in at any moment. I climbed inside, sat down in the front row, and tried to imagine what it felt like when they vanished. Did they feel it coming? Did they hear anything? Or was it just a blink, 1 second breathing, and the next second gone? I pressed my hands into the seat cushion, still warm from sun through the glass, and felt like I was touching a ghost. There are whispers about Washington being gone, not just silent, but emptied. A man on shortwave swore he'd driven through part of it, said the White House lawn was littered with shoes and chairs, as if a gathering had been erased in one breath. Said he shouted in front of the Capitol, and the only answer was the echo of his own voice. If that's true, then whatever happened here isn't local. It isn't contained. It's everywhere. The thought makes my chest tighten, because if entire capitals can vanish, then who's left to guide us? We are steering blind now. A boat in a storm with no lighthouse, no charts, only the sound of water against wood. The pattern I spoke about last night, groups vanishing, the alone left standing, keeps circling in my mind. I tested it today. Walked into a corner store and stood with a stray cat I'd seen there before. The moment stretched. Nothing happened. The cat stared at me, licked its paw, and slipped away. Maybe it only applies to people. Maybe the line is drawn at human connection. If that's true, then every step towards someone else could be dangerous. And yet, what's the point of being spared if we never touch, never speak, never stand near each other? Survival without each other feels like another kind of disappearance. I met a woman named Janine by accident. She was sitting on the curb near a laundromat, eating from a can with her bare hands. When she saw me, she froze like I was a ghost. I almost turned away, thinking if I joined her, we'd both vanish. But then she laughed, sharp and cracked, and said, "If it wants us, it'll take us anyway." So I sat down. We shared the can between us. For a long time, we didn't talk, just listened to the emptiness. Then she said her son was gone. He'd been in the bathtub when the vanishings hit, and all that was left was the water still rippling, as if something had been there. She hasn't turned the faucet on since. We didn't say anything else after that. When I stood to leave, she grabbed my sleeve and whispered, "Talk tonight. Don't let the city go quiet, I promised I would." So here I am, keeping the promise. The generator is running low, but the red light is still on, and the words are still going out. If you hear me, I want you to know that you're not invisible. You're not just waiting to vanish. You're a name, a sound, a story. Write it down, speak it out loud, tape it to the wall, whisper it to the night. We need to mark ourselves against the silence, because if we don't, the silence will eat us too. This is Caleb Foster, 92.3 FM. It's the 5th day since the first vanishings, and the city is thin, but it's still here. We're still here. And until the last voice fades, we're not gone. The days are folding into one another now, each one a thin page torn from the same bad book. There's a rhythm to it, even if it's a sad one. Morning checks for water, midday walks to trade what we don't need for what we do, late afternoons spent mending what can be mended, and nights when the mist returns and the radio carries our small, stubborn breath across the city. People have started to organize in ways that surprise me. Little committees that form around problems and then dissolve when the problem is solved. A block on South Side has a water watcher, someone whose job is to check the tanks and rotate the supply. A group in Greenfield runs a nightly sweep for anyone who hasn't answered their door. In Carrick, a retired mechanic taught 3 neighbors how to patch a flat tire and keep a rain barrel from freezing. These are not heroic acts in the movies. They're slow, patient things. Someone showing someone else how to tie a hose so it doesn't leak. Someone else taking an extra turn cooking because the neighbor's hands are full of small burns. It all stacks up into survival. It all adds to tomorrow. Something new is happening with the radio. Other people are talking back now. Not always to me, sometimes to each other. But the air feels less like one lonely throat and more like a room with multiple voices. A few mornings ago, a woman calling herself Harper left a message on the community board taped to the library window. "We have a solar rig on the roof. We can charge batteries by day. Bring tools. Bring names." I walked over with a roll of wire and a handful of AA batteries, and found 7 people already there, passing the time with threads and jokes that were small and sharp and human. They showed me how they'd stripped recycled panels from a collapsed sign and wired them to a deep cycle battery scavenged from a boat. They had run a string to a neighborhood fridge and were keeping a small store of insulin and antibiotics cool for those who needed them. It was a miracle that had nothing to do with divinity, and everything to do with stubborn skill and the willingness to share. If you can, find a place like that and stay. If you can't, make one small thing better where you are. The disappearances have changed how people move. Folks avoid gathering in groups larger than 3 unless it's a planned work crew. Weddings, funerals, birthday parties, everything that used to pull the city together have stopped because groups feel dangerous now. Instead, people meet in pairs or small shifts. They text on paper and leave notes like pigeons carrying messages. The absence of crowds has made public places into private ones. Restaurants that once served hundreds now hold a handful of survivors who sit like conspirators, swapping tips about filters and what parts fit what. The market has become a place of barter rather than money. A boy traded a pack of diapers for a notebook. An electrician swapped a headlamp for a can of beans. No one seems to want to hoard alone anymore. Maybe the vanishings taught us greed is useless. Maybe they taught us that the simple act of sharing can keep the street from turning on itself. I've been thinking a lot about memory and what we owe it. The library's map has become a shrine of names, and people add to it like they would a grocery list: urgent, practical, private. Sometimes I add notes in the margins about food left at particular addresses, or a stove that still works, or a dog that needs feeding. Other people write terse messages. Found keys at corner of 6th, or call sign Blue Lantern left for Monroeville. There's a stack of folded photographs beneath a loose floorboard at the library, where people leave copies of faces they miss. I don't look through them often, because each picture weighs like a small sun inside my chest. But once in a while I take one out. 2 friends at a summer fair, a child with a grin so wide the cheeks vanish, and I read the names on the back. We are building a record because the world has shown it can forget us. This is how we resist, by putting ink into the places memory can reach. There are things that go bad when people leave. Food spoils fast when refrigerators keep humming with no one to check them. The city's rats have become braver, and you can see them at dusk in the alleys where the lights are out. A new kind of wildlife that wasn't supposed to own the streets. Fires leap up sometimes when ovens run unattended, and there's no one to smother the first spark. I watched a volunteer group this week fight a blaze in a storage unit with old blankets and a bucket line. We stood in a circle passing buckets like a chain of small miracles. The fire burned down a stack of cardboard and left behind a smell that follows you like sorrow. We got the flames out. We saved the books stacked inside. That night, around the remaining embers, we read aloud from one of the rescued titles, because reading is a way to bring the words back into the air where people can touch them. There are also people who have not changed. Some of the city's institutions still behave like their old selves, but with no staff to keep them honest. The courthouse clocks tick, even though courtroom doors hang open. The transit signs display last week's apologies and delays. The PR voice on a news feed read a press release about emergency funding for recovery, and then cut off mid-sentence. I sometimes listen to those fragments because they remind me of the world before and how sharp the contrast is. It hurts, but I think it's important to keep those things in the fold so we don't lose the shape of what we're built from. I want to tell you the bad things because keeping them hidden doesn't help. There are opportunists, people who try to take advantage of the chaos. They creep in like the mold that finds the damp. Looters who move not out of need, but because the rules are gone, and the world doesn't punish them. We had one such group a few nights back. They tried to take more than they needed from a soup kitchen, and were turned back by a circle of neighbors with crowbars and shouts. It wasn't pretty. It was messy and human. The neighbors didn't become villains. They became defenders. They took what they needed to keep the soup for the kids. That's the moral math now. We prioritize the vulnerable. We keep the little ones and the old ones at the center. We build our rules in pencil because the city is changing, and we have to be ready to erase and rewrite when necessary. And then there are the miracles that come out of nowhere. A dentist who'd never run a diesel generator taught 3 people to keep his clinic's lights on long enough to read charts and dose medicines. A plumber with nothing left but his tools fixed a burst pipe at a shelter and stopped 100 gallons a day from flooding their basement. Small trades become life, Skills have currency that money never could. If you know how to make a nitty thing work, you are richer than you were last month. Teach it. Don't hide it. We're all apprentices now. Tonight, I will open the microphone a little earlier. People have asked for an hour for questions and an hour for names. They want to hear each other and to list who they are and where they sat down that day. I don't promise answers. I promise to be a place where those names can be spoken. Speak yours if you can. Tell us what you fixed today, or who you shared your coffee with, or the way the light hit your window like it remembered something. Leave a mark, and if you can, leave a note for someone who might come back. The vanished may not return tomorrow. They may not ever. But our act of naming them keeps them inside us in a way that the mist cannot erase. My name is Caleb Foster. This is 92.3 FM. If you can hear me, say your name tonight. Say where you are. Say one small thing that keeps you going. If you can't speak, tape a note to your door. We are making a city out of paper and radio and the small bones of kindness. That's enough to stand on. Keep standing.